Welcome to the Ultimate Coach Podcast, Conversations from Being, inspired by the book, The Ultimate Coach, written by Amy Hardison and Alan Thompson. Join us each week with the intention of expanding your state of being, and your experience will be remarkable. Remember, this is a podcast about being. It is a podcast about you. To explore more deeply, visit theultimatecoachbook.com. Now, enjoy today's conversation from Being.
I'm so excited to be here today with one of the main people who was covered a lot in the book of Being, and that is Scott Parker. He is the man who Amy Hardison described as the most handsome man in the world. And
oh, brother.
And Steve.
I'm already.
He's already changing colors.
I don't know what I do with that. Wow.
Yeah, but all that to say that he goes back to the beginning of Steve's story as a missionary. So welcome to the Ultimate Coach Podcast, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Yeah. So, I actually, in preparation for this conversation, I had to go back and look in the book of where you were discussed. You were discussed a lot, and one thing really stuck out to me is there was a time when you really needed to speak to him, and there's something that he detected in your voice. Do you remember that?
That's very common with him. Very common with Steve. You can't. I live about 1,000 miles away from Steve, and he'll call me, or I'll call him, and he can hear it in my voice. He can hear something in my voice, and he typically probes a little bit. And see now I after years of this, I know, you can't say nothing. Oh, no, everything's fine. No problem. No, that's not going to go. No, that doesn't work with him. So, but in all fairness, I try not to take advantage of that. That's one thing I've learned in my relationship with him, is I have tried not to take advantage of my friendship with him and turn it into some kind of a help kind of thing with him. I mean, he constantly, he always says to me, "Is there anything else I can do for you? Can I do anything else?" And I try to hold that in a special place, and I try not to take advantage of it. So I have to be careful when he says that. How's everything going? I have to be careful how I answer. So
I'm wondering, on the other end of that, though, as his friend, you must also offer to serve him and support him, right? Mm-hmm. How does that look?
Well, you have to remember, I've watched Steve evolve, and Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach, wasn't always Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach. I've watched this happen over literally 47 years of friendship with Steve.
Wow.
And I counted it the other day, and
I'm good at math.
It'll be 47 in August. It'll be 47 in August. The end of August is when we first met in 1975.
Okay.
And so I've watched Steve evolve, and so I think we have subconsciously supported each other. There's been times in my life when I've needed more from him than he's needed from me. And he's always been there. He's always been willing to help and lift and counsel and give me his perspective and coach me. I mean, even before he was a coach, he was coaching me, so I didn't know it at the time, but that's what he was doing. He probably didn't know at the time that he was doing that, but that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to watch. It's been amazing to watch this evolution of his. But the thing that I want to stress in this is that Steve Hardison today is, to me, and I know him very well, is very much the way he was when we were 19 years old. Mm. He's shifted things in his life and monetized things and done things with his abilities, but he was always caring. He was always different than anybody else when it came to his involvement and his, his heart. You always knew he was, whenever I would speak to him, I always felt like there was nobody else. He wasn't thinking about anything else. He was really just thinking about me. And that's his special gift. His special gift is he can just pierce right through you. And I've had many people ask me, what's he like? And I always say, well, not always, but I often say, he could be with you, and within 5 minutes, he would know almost everything about you. He would know what you are all about. And he just has this gift of being able to see right through you and feel who you are, good and bad. And with no judgment. I mean, Steve is a very non-judgment kind of guy. He's really like, hey, this is what is. What can we do with this? How can I serve you? That's really how he operates. And he always has operated that way. It's amazing. And I think that's one of the things that's always attracted me to him. And that's why we've had such a long relationship. And, when you have a long relationship with somebody like this, it's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. It has to be a two-way street. And it has been a two-way street. And so I'm just very grateful for that and very thankful for that.
So in which ways would you say you've supported him?
I don't know. That's a great question. It's hard for me to say how have I supported him. I think, we've had personal conversations about our lives, about our marriages, about our children. And I think in that way, I've listened. I've been a listening place for him to speak. I think that's probably the main way that I've just been a friend that he could always count on. If I told him I was going to do something, I would do it. He could always count on me. And I've not tried to take advantage of that. And that's something that I've learned. I don't think I always looked at that way. And I don't think I was always aware of maybe overreaching into our relationship. To me, it was always a friendship. And I learned over time I had to be careful with that friendship.
Yeah. So you truly cherish your friendship and you hold space for him when it's appropriate. And you also are in competition with him, right? That's really a joke. It's meant to be a joke because you have 6 kids, he has 4, but you both have 11 grandchildren. So when are you going to break that tie?
I don't know. I don't know who's going to break that tie. I don't know. But I think we probably have a couple more on our side coming, but who knows? I stay out of that. I stay out of that whole
deal. Yeah, who knows will go first. Right. So I'm wondering when, before I get to that, actually, how has that shifted your way of being through the years? As your relationship has evolved with Steve, right? You've been living and growing. He's been living and growing. How has that shifted you personally?
Well, he is clearly my dearest friend, my closest friend. And, I was just with him last weekend and he said that same thing to me. He said, you are my closest friend. And I was a little surprised by that because I know how many people he has in his life. And when he said that to me, it really meant a lot to me. So I think, that's a big question. How has my relationship, how has my interaction with him shifted my way of being? I think by osmosis, in some ways, I've been able to become more aware. I don't consider myself a very Zen person. In fact, I've been told I'm not a very Zen person. And so I am around this world of Steve's, and I'm around a lot of the people that are in this world, but I'm not kind of one of those. I don't have a coaching practice. I don't have anything like that. I'm a real estate developer, and that's what I do. But just, you can't help but be around him and not be affected by his goodness. And it's just fun to be with him. I mean, it doesn't matter where we go. It doesn't matter what we're doing. It's just fun. I mean, he reaches out to people. He talks to people he doesn't know. I mean, but I'm a lot that way as well. And so when I'm with Steve, it's not a competition. I kind of let him do what he does. But see, when I'm with other people, I'm a bit like that too. And so it's fun to be with Steve and watch him. I've watched him do amazing things with people. He's met people, he helps people, he serves people, he'll give people money, he'll right on the spot. I mean, he's just a very giving. He's just got a huge, huge heart. And I think that's his greatest attribute, is his heart. And I think everything flows from there. And I think the other thing I've realized is I'm very fortunate that I have this friendship with him, and I know him so well, because I think a lot of people can misinterpret his enthusiasm and his extroverted ways, sometimes as being not real or being narcissistic or self-promoting or whatever. I think, but I know what Steve is really about, and I just know his heart, and I just know exactly what he's like, and what he's really like at his core. And I think it's come from all those years. It's come from watching his relationship with Amy and knowing Amy so well. I mean, I met Amy when she was 17 years old. Amy, Steve and I met in England, and then Steve came home about a year before I did. And you're there for 2 years. And so Steve was out about a year when I met him. And so Steve came home, and then he met Amy, and they got engaged. And then Amy started writing to me before I came home from England. That's how long I've known her. And then I remember meeting Amy in person for the first time. It was December of 1977. And I had a girlfriend at the time, and the four of us sat down and we had pizza someplace in Utah. I think it was in Provo. And I said to Amy, "How old are you?" And Steve and Amy looked at each other, and Steve said, "Well, let's just say our kid," and their wedding was about 3 weeks away. And he said, "Let's just say our kids will say, 'Mom, were you really only 18 for 2 weeks when you got married?'" So that was a way of saying Amy was 17 years old.
Yeah.
When I met her. And so that's how long they've been in my life, and I've been in their life. And so it's been wonderful to watch all of this, and watch, Steve grow, and watch Amy grow, and watch them grow together, and, know that there's been bumps along the way. But they are so committed to each other. They've worked right through those. So.
Yeah. What about you and Steve? What kind of bumps have you had?
Yeah. Well, you really can't have a 47-year relationship without some big bumps. And I went through a divorce I had a very rough first marriage, and this is where my children, this is the mother of my children, my 6 children. And we got married very young also, and just had some issues that we never did work through. And so I probably towards the end of that marriage, I would say the last 3 or 4 years, it was probably a big bitch session every time I talked to Steve. And I think honestly, it became toxic.
Yeah.
I became toxic. And so I did get divorced, and I was divorced for a while, and I was still a mess. I was really a mess because of that marriage. And I really didn't realize what kind of damage had been done in that until I met my second wife, and I would kind of tell her some of the things, and she would give me her opinion and give me her perspective. But in all of that, I was talking to Steve a lot, and Steve offered to help me several times. And I really kind of pushed back on his help. At the time, I really didn't want our friendship to get in the middle of some kind of a coaching relationship. And Steve was really pushing for a coaching relationship with me, and I was resisting it. And he finally said to me, it's funny. That's the letter right there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the letter. He finally said to me, and this is dated 17 May 2004. He basically said, I'm done. I'm done with you. And you need help. You don't want me to help you. Get some help. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't show up at my door. Don't write to me. Don't.
Wow.
No rebuttal. No. And I always call this my divorce, our divorce.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And it was brutal. And I had just met my second wife at the time. I'd known her for maybe a month when this happened. And I was floored. I was really floored by it. And at the time, I really looked at it like, what's his problem?
Yeah.
I didn't realize what I've learned is how hard it was for him to write this letter to me. It had to be horribly hard to write this letter. And I also realized how horrible I must have been for him to write this letter. Yeah. Because at the time when it happened, I was kind of like, wow, look what Steve did. I didn't think like, what have I done? I just was like, look what Steve did. Can you believe this? And I shared it with a few of our close friends, mutual friends, and they were blown away. They were like, wow, but everybody, we all know Steve is like kind of in a different world, and so we were kind of like, well, Steve's doing Steve. And as time went on, well, maybe I shouldn't say of course, but I did honor what he asked me to do. And I had no contact with him. I didn't initiate any contact. So I met my wife, as I said, right around this time. And we dated for about 15 months. So the first time I saw Steve after this happened was at a mutual friend's wedding in August of 2005. So not quite a year and a half, but about a year and a half later was the first time I saw Steve. And this was a very dear friend of ours, a mutual friend, who was getting remarried. And Steve was actually performing the ceremony. And so my late wife, Jan, and I went to it. And so I saw Steve for the first time, and it was very awkward and it was very cool. And there's a picture, there's 4 of us that we were all missionaries together that have stayed very, very close. And these were 2 of the guys that I had shared. So they all knew about this letter. And, nobody said anything about it, but there's a picture of us, the 4 of us, and it's the most awkward picture. Steve and I are standing next to each other. And I'm kind of like, can we take this? And it's very awkward.
I want to just pause you there for a minute, because there's a couple of things that I want to slow down with. So you were in deep judgment of Steve. And at that time, were not in a place where you saw your responsibility in that.
Right. Definitely.
And you invited others to be on your judgment party.
Yes, definitely.
And the reason why I'm slowing that down is for the people who are listening.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have a big blow up with a friend who you've known for a very long time, it's almost like a default setting to get other people to
validation.
Yes.
I was getting validation, like.
And did that serve you?
Oh, definitely. That definitely made me feel better. I mean, artificially, it was an artificial thing. But again, I think this is my unzenness, right? I mean, this is a very worldly way of handling a problem. This isn't going deep. This is just bouncing on the top of it. And this is what a lot of people do, is they bounce on the top of relationship problems like this. And that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what I did. I wanted validation. And of course, the two guys that I talked to knew some of the story, but they had no idea what had been shared between him and I. But yet, and they probably, in reality, they were probably like, hey, we're going to just stay neutral. We're not taking sides on any of this stuff. But in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, look what an asshole Steve is.
Right.
I mean, really, that's what I thought at the time. I never for a minute back then thought how difficult it was for him to write that letter.
So Scott has read me the letter off air, and I'm going to give my reflections on it first, Scott, if you're okay with that. And then you can respond to what I have to say. So I heard it as very respectful, very clear on setting the boundary of, you are so toxic right now, but I love you so deeply and so much that for the best thing I can do for you to support you is to only offer you myself as a coach, because that's what you really need. And if you don't want to take me up on that offer, then I don't want to have anything to do with you. And I heard it as very non-judgmental, very loving, very clear. And this is actually the kind of loving that most people miss in their relationships. If we were all this way in our relationships, the world would be healthier. That's what I got from listening to the letter. And I feel validated in that because you guys are still friends.
Yeah, right. No, I think your perception and I think being an outsider looking in, I think you can see it much more clearly. It was devastating to me to get this letter. It was rip my heart out and step on it and kick it. And it was really devastating to get this. And I didn't, I couldn't appreciate where it was coming from at the time it happened. But looking back, our relationship had become, in one place in the letter, he basically said, you've sucked the life right out of it. You've sucked the oxygen out of it. And, when you do that, you don't have much. And this is where he was at. See, for me, I was thinking, hey, I've got a new version of my story. So listen to this. I've even got it down better now. This is how right I am and how wrong everything that's happened is, and how right I am about it. And he was like looking at me like, dude, you are such a mess. You don't even get it. You don't even realize it. And really it was I know now it was really, really hard for him to write that letter to me and say what needed to be said. But like you've just said, this was coming from a place of love. And this is Steve Hardison on steroids, because this is him really in action saying, this can't stand. This can no longer stand. And I'm going I've got to hit you right in the face with this, without physically hitting you in the face. I've got to verbally hit you in the face, and I've got to geographically hit you in the face. And I've got to end. You have to realize I'm ending this relationship.
Yeah.
That's how bad I was. That's what a mess I was. And I didn't get that. I didn't get that message at the time. I knew I was a mess. I didn't think I deserved the letter, but I knew I was a mess, and I respected what he said, and I didn't reach out to him, and I didn't try to debate him on this. And I was basically quiet, and I just tried to move forward, and I did start to heal myself. And I think, that process has gone on and goes on every day, so, and I know now, I didn't know then, but I'm very grateful for what he did and how emphatic he was about it. And that's Steve Hardison. That's what he's about. He's not ambiguous,
No, he's very clear.
He's very clear, and he was very clear, and it was necessary. It was needed, and I'm grateful for it. And it took me a while to appreciate it. And even after we put our relationship together, I don't know that I really fully grasped what a mess I was, and how deserving I was of that, and how necessary that was. That was the only way to repair anything and between us, was to sever it and, allow me to begin to fix myself, heal myself, whatever, And like I said, that's a process that continues to this day. So I love him for loving me that much. That's and and I feel grateful that that's my attitude. I think sometimes people are right and they can never be wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why relationships don't get fixed, is because they can never take responsibility for their part in it. I spoke about my daughter earlier, and if I sat down with her, she would know that I would take responsibility for my part in that. And whether she did or not, I would take my part in it. And in many ways I have said that to her. But this thing with Steve was it was probably the most horrible thing on one hand, and it was probably the best thing on another hand that's ever happened between us, for sure. So
yeah, sign of fierce loving and the opportunity to begin again and create anew, and actually understanding what loving is.
Yeah.
Because you weren't in a place to receive love.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's the important part about, repairing a relationship, a friendship, is understanding that it's the adversity that actually deepens the bond. And adversity is an opportunity. Right. 100%. It's not like the line in the sand or anything like that. It's the opportunity to create.
Right. Yeah, that's I think you're right on with that comment. And I think sometimes people look for adversity, they look for it, they try to create it. But I think in a situation where it's kind of created on its own, it is a wonderful and incredible opportunity to create something way better, far in excess of what you had. And that's kind of what we've done, the two of us. And again, I give Steve a lot of credit on that side for, for being willing to fix it without this coaching, relationship, that eventually happened, but it didn't happen at that time.
At that time. Yeah. Whatever's meant to be will be.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I'm grateful for you and Steve's relationship being a model for others to learn from.
Well, thank you. If it can help anybody, I'm grateful for that. I hope it can, because it's a real deal. It's a wonderful thing we have. It's always fun.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
You bet.
People don't see themselves.
Right.
We only see our truth. And once you can get to a place where you can honor the other person's truth, then you can see your responsibility in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would be the lesson that you would want to share to people listening about the possibility of repairing severely severed friendships?
Well, I think the only thing that really keeps you from that is pride, your own pride, and your own ill-fated commitment to your way of being. I mean, your mistakenly way of being. And I think, and I'm certainly guilty of this. We try to be right all the time, and we try to be on top of things. And in that instance, I think I knew I was a mess. I just don't think I thought I deserved what he did to me. But since then, I've realized that was the only way. It couldn't keep, these conversations we were having couldn't keep going on. There had to be a clean break and a clean start over. You couldn't do that by just saying, hey, let's take a break for a week. I'll call you and let's start over. It had to be something really severe. And I guess what I would say is it was worth all of it. It was worth the pain. It was worth the hurt. And our relationship is, again, this long relationship we've had has progressed. It hasn't stayed stagnant. It continues to progress. And it's a very dynamic thing. And I'm very grateful for that. And I think whenever there's a difficulty in a relationship, I think the most important thing is to step back and say, what have I done to create this? And what can I do to repair this?
So it's kind of interesting how that almost mirrors what was happening with you and Steve. You know what I mean? It's kind of she has her own toxicity. And I call that, when the relationships that are affected by that, I call our emotional splatter, right? Yeah. Kind of severs us from other people. So,
Again, I think it's pride. It's so much pride. We have so much pride. We can't see our part in the difficulty in a relationship, and we aren't willing to admit to our contribution to it. We just want to, it's kind of like when Steve wrote me the letter, hey, look what Steve did. Of course, I didn't tell him what I did.
Right.
I was just saying what Steve did.
There's two sides.
Yeah. That's what is often said. So I think repairing relationships, that's what this is all about, right? This is what it's repairing the relationship inside of us, and it's repairing the relationship with others. That's what this work that all of you are doing is all about, it seems like. And it's so valuable and it's so important.
You're doing it too.
Yeah. I am, you're right. I am trying to do it in my life. I am trying to be that. And, but you really have to get your pride out of the way. You have to allow yourself to be exposed to your own fallacies, and you have to own them, and you have to be willing to own them. And I think that's the difficulty You see on social media so much people, it gives people a platform to speak, right?
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people talk about the difficulties in their relationships, and they don't ever go into detail. They just talk about, the toxic people that I'm done with the toxic people around me,
Right.
I'm amazed how many people talk about that on social media.
But the other side of that, like what you're saying and what we all have to be responsible for, is we don't have toxic people in our life without attracting that because of the toxicity within.
That's right. That's so true. And I want to say that sometimes, but I don't even know who this person is. So I don't say it. I just go by. But you're absolutely right. And I think if there's any takeaway here in this difficult relationship that I experienced with Steve, it was that it had to be owned. It had to be acknowledged. It had to be owned. And I think the fact that I have been able to do that, and Steve, together we've done that, I think that strengthened our relationship, and it made it even better, that we went through this difficult patch and then we fixed it. And we forgave each other. Or
you recreated, right?
Yeah, that's probably a better way to say it. We recreated it, and I think that's why I say our relationship is dynamic, and it's continued to evolve as time has evolved. It really has. And I think that we both have been interested in growing it. And I think that's what's made it great as well. So
when were you able to really heal yourself? Because it seems like you came out of one marriage, you broke up with your best friend, and then you started another relationship.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of that relationship, you were still carrying a little bit of baggage, to be fair, right? Because you're sharing stories.
Absolutely.
Like, when did your healing occur?
I think, again, I think it just is it's a time evolution. I don't think I could put a date certain that this is when it happened. I think it's an ongoing process. I think it's a journey that I don't know that you ever get off. I mean, you're constantly reassessing, and you're constantly reevaluating, and you're constantly repairing and patching. And I think, again, one of the great things that happened that probably helped me the most was I did have a coaching relationship with Steve. And I spent time with him in that relationship. And I had always thought that would get in the way of our friendship. And I'm not really sure.
So you're saying you hired him as a coach? When was that?
Probably back around 2012 or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 10, 11, 12 in that area. And like I said, I don't really know what shifted for me to do that. And I remember telling my wife that I was going to do this, and she was like, the money.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her respectfully, I said, I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you, this is what I'm going to do. I'm doing this. So I'm not really coming to you saying, is it okay with you? I'm doing this. And that was an amazing experience. That was amazing to be in his presence in that kind of circumstance. And for those that are listening that have coached with him, know exactly what I'm talking about. And those that are listening that haven't coached with him and would like to coach with him, or I would just say, whatever you have to do to do it, because it's the greatest thing you could ever do. And I remember literally thinking the money was insignificant after you got in there and got a piece of this, that it was cheap money for what he was giving you, what you were getting out of this, what you could do with this. And I've had several people, I think I kind of said this at the beginning, but several people say, what was it like? What did he do? What was it?
Yeah.
And I said, well, it doesn't matter what it was for me, because it wouldn't be that for you.
Yeah.
It'd be completely different for you. What he did for me was for me.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be that for you. And yeah, it was
Yeah.
incredible.
It's a very individual experience in general. Coaching is,
Right.
and Steve isn't different. So yeah, I my Be With session, I don't know if it counts as a Be With session because we were walking.
Yeah.
So very different. So okay, so that could have been part of your healing if you
I
coached
think
with him it was a full year.
No, it was not a full year. It was an abbreviated deal. It was for a few months that
Okay.
we had agreed to do this. And I didn't really realize that he would even do that, but it was like a prorated amount for a few months. And yeah, it was, but it was still extremely impactful. And it never got in the way of our friendship. And it wasn't, when I would go to Arizona, I typically stay at Steve and Amy's house. And when I was doing the coaching thing, no, that's not what happened. I was there and I stayed someplace else and I showed up and I left. And it wasn't like, oh, let's go out to dinner tonight. No, this is a coaching relationship now. And I respected that. And that was good. That was healthy for the whole experience for me to put it in that way. So, yeah.
So that's something else, that our listeners can pull out is that it's possible to be coached by your friend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think you as the Coach E, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Coach E you've got to get yourself in the right place for that. You've got to be able to hear that person from that place. You can't think, well, I know everything about him. I know everything about her. She or he can't tell me really anything new. Oh, I can't. That couldn't be more wrong.
Yeah, there's a great audio by Steve Chandler about personal versus social self that really addresses that well. It's like 23 minutes, but I listen to that probably once a month just to remind myself, Yeah. So yeah. Wow, Scott.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to put into this space? Yeah.
Well, the book, to speak about the book was an amazing compilation of Steve's life, which of course we're to look at it as our life and look at it from our point of view. But the book is just amazing. And
how many times have you read it?
I've read it, I think 3 times, and I've listened to it twice.
Okay.
And it's funny, every time I do it, I get something. Well, how did I miss that part? I always get something new out of it.
Yeah.
Steve was here last week and we had a little get together at lunch, and there were probably, 20 or 30 people that showed up. And, Steve spoke a little bit, everybody shared a little bit about what they've learned about the book. And so probably, 10 or 12 people spoke and then Steve spoke, and it was very informal. It wasn't like this formal thing. And, the thing that Steve said in this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. This is our life. It's happening right now. So in other words, don't wait. You can do things. You can make things happen. You're free to express yourself, to make a phone call, to fix something, to make something happen. You can do it. Whatever you want. One of the greatest takeaways from coaching with Steve was something that he taught me. He said, you live into the life you speak. And I remember him saying that to me, and I was kind of like, oh yeah. Uh-huh. And then I really started thinking about it. And, he said it a few times over the course of our coaching time. And then I started listening to people that I knew. And there's somebody I know in my life. I won't identify the person, but it's a female and she's very chaotic. And every time you talk to her, you can say, hey, how's it going? Just chaos. It's just, well, her whole life is always chaos.
Right. Yeah.
I remember thinking about her as one of the first people when he said this to me. I ran into her or something and I was like, oh, here's a good example of somebody who speaks chaos, and yeah, they live in chaos. Mm-hmm. And so what I did at that point is I started eliminating words out of my vocabulary. And I'd have to sit down and think about what they were, but they were anything negative, anything that would ridicule somebody or anything negative about something. Like, oh, well, that never works. I just eliminated stuff like that out of my vocabulary. And then I started listening to how people speak. And I was like, okay, that guy I know just said something, and yeah, that's the way his life is. And so that has had a real profound impact on me. That's probably the greatest takeaway I had from my time with him, that I've been able to implement. I've been able to implement, I think, a lot of things, but that one is an everyday, every time you open your mouth kind of thing. You think about what are you saying? What are you projecting? What are you reflecting? So I'm very cognizant of that and try to be, I try to say things that matter. For the most part, it's not always the case, but, I try.
So you realize your part in creation and you're taking responsibility for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're always creating with our way of being. I'm paraphrasing. That's in the book.
Yeah. It's, it's an amazing thing to realize. It's a simple thing, but it's an amazing thing to realize. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
And to be clear, simple is not a synonym of easy, right? Which is why most of us don't do it.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Sometimes we completely miss the simplicity of how we could be. And it gets complex and it gets complicated and difficult, and it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. When you live without judgment and when you just have a pure, clear intention.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel very lucky to have this relationship with Steve. Very fortunate. I know that. I'm grateful for it. I honestly know if I needed anything, all I'd have to do is pick up the phone and he would come, he would do something would be sent, whatever needed. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm not alone. I know there's a lot of people that have this kind of relationship with him, but I'm just one, and I'm just grateful for it. I'm lucky. Mine's probably longer than most people. Mm-hmm. But he still has amazing relationships with others as well. And I've met a lot of them. He's introduced me to a lot of his clients over the years I've met, and it's been great. Wonderful.
And I'm also wondering, in your many reads of the book, how many of those clients do you know or recognize?
Oh gosh, I'd have to count them, but there's several. Okay. Several. I'd have to count them up, but there's several. I would say, I'm just guessing 10 or 12, maybe 15. I don't know. I'd have to count them. And I haven't done that.
Is there any particular story that really resonates with you out of there? It doesn't have to be related to you or anybody else in particular, but is there any part of the book that resonates most with you? Well,
I think maybe this is or isn't, but I think people see Steve as this coach, but he's got this unbelievable business mind. He's really an incredible business mind. He could literally run any Fortune 500 company. When he left Rodell, now I don't know if that, that's a part of the book, and he talks about that. And I remember when that was happening, And Steve was really kind of lost. And I remember saying to him, so he told me what he had done. He told me he'd resigned and he'd given him 6 months. And they walked in about a week before the 6 months was up with a blank check and basically said, what's it going to take? And so I remember when he was telling me about this, I said, so if you would have written $2 or $3 million, would they have? And he goes, yeah, they would have done it.
Wow.
But it wasn't about money. He just was not happy. He was not fulfilled doing that. He was traveling all around the world. He was, probably jet lagged all the time.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
But he just wasn't happy. And obviously this was not his calling, was to do that. He still has a really great relationship with the, CEO, president of that company. But Steve could run any company. I mean, really, he's probably the most brilliant person I know. He's definitely the most amazing human being I know. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to do what he does. And, a lot of people that do this travel and they put on big seminars and they charge big money and they fill up big auditoriums. Steve is best right in front of somebody. That's his best. He's one-on-one is where he is so powerful, so powerful. And that's what he could make way more money than he makes. And he makes a lot of money. We all know that. He makes a lot of money. He could make way more money if he wanted to. He just doesn't want to. Doesn't want to. And I give him a lot of credit for that. And I give Amy a lot of credit for that. They've created a lifestyle that fits them. And that's admirable too. He has ambition, but it's not a worldly ambition. It's an ambition to reach people and to touch people and to care about people. That's what he's all about, is people.
So I'm hearing two things in your answer. One thing is his brilliant business mind really comes forth for you. And then secondly, his way of creating his life. I guess the third thing I'm hearing also is through his way of being, he's created a business that suits his life, right? And that's a lesson in the book, because we're reading the book as if it's about us. So I guess for you as a real estate developer, you would gravitate towards the lessons of your business brilliance and the way you're being in your business and what are the possibilities you can create from that aspect. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. I mean, that part of him has always amazed me. And he transitioned from business into this coaching world. And, but then when you go to some of the people that he's coached, he's taken me to some of these companies and he's thrown out some of these numbers that we were here and now they're there. And, Steve could take a lot of credit for that. He doesn't, but he's given a lot of credit. I think the CEOs that he coaches give him a lot of credit for their success. And he's amazing that way. I think that's understated in Steve's life. I think that's understated. And I think he doesn't care, that it's overstated. I don't think he cares about that. I think the people that know that.
And the fact is he's changing the world one heart at a time. And in some cases, it sounds like one business at a time.
Yeah. I've asked him a different time, how many people are you coaching? And he goes, the one right in front of me.
Yep.
And that's a great answer. That's a great answer because it's not about, it doesn't matter how many people he coaches. What matters is who's sitting in front of him. And that's really what he's all about. He's very real. And he has said that even people that he's coached for 5 or 6 years don't really get that he's real. They still don't, they still question whether he's really real or not. And he's totally real. So,
yeah. My experience of him, he's very genuine and very present.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And that is a lesson for all of us, and the way we're creating who we're being.
Right. No, and he's like that. He's like that with his children. He's like that with everybody. He's just, I've seen him interact with his children and his grandchildren, and he's just an amazing, amazing guy. Knowing him, he would not want me to sit there and talk about him. He would say, all of us have this in us to be this, if we will. And that's the greatest message I think that he would want to give, is all of us have this in us if we'll just do it and just be that. Be aware of the people around us, reach out to them, be present, be caring, be involved. All of these things that Steve is so good at, all of us can do this. And we just have to do it. And if we will, our life will be different. Our life can be richer. And I think he doesn't so much want a light shined on him. He wants to shine a light on all of us, is what I think is what he really, really wants to do. He wants all of us to get that message that we can do this ourselves. We can be these things, and it'll make our life that much richer and make the life of those around us that much richer. And I think that's the lesson, is to kind of get outside of ourselves a little bit, or maybe a lot. So.
Thank you, Scott. It's been a joy to be with you today. And I love everything you shared. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you know someone who would benefit from today's conversation, please share this podcast with them. Also, we invite you to visit theultimatecoachbook.com so you can continue your personal exploration of being. There you will find links to join our wonderful community, get your own copy of the Ultimate Coach book, and more. Simply go now to www.theultimatecoachbook.com. That's www.theultimatecoachbook.com. The link is also available in the show notes. We appreciate your support. Be blessed. Be you.